Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Risk Matrix with myself, Dr. Martin, and my pal over here, James Junkin.
Roll Tide. Roll Tide.
You
Good
guys
to be.
weren't expecting that, were you? He's an Alabama fan, and he's got me as an Alabama fan too. So hopefully, when this rolls out, they've won a bunch more games, James.
Boy, that Georgia game was awesome. Awesome.
That's right.
Just saying.
Got some steam going. So
That's it.
today we're going to talk about onboarding employees and how important it is to have a good onboarding program, what that looks like, tips and tricks to help onboard your people, things you should be thinking about. I know that a lot of people just kind of willy-nilly bring people on and they kind of try to train people on the fly and get them into company culture on the fly. It's really not a good idea to do that. It's really a better idea to have a plan. So we're going to talk about that. Before we do, James, rip from the headlines.
Well, this is not related to the shutdown, and by the time this airs, I hope the shutdown's over. But in our last episode, we talked a little bit about OSHA furloughing workers for their process during the shutdown and how few OSHA employees are actually on the job. I think there's only 400 left across the country, most of them an area director and a co-show, maybe some administrative staff. But that reminded me, and you and I talked about this actually a few months ago, but it brought it back up about the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission, that there have been no commissioners since the beginning of May.
So James, before you go down that road and you tell us about not having any review commissioners, can you explain to listeners that might not know what role they play in the scheme of things?
So when you have an OSHA inspection and their citations, normally most companies elect to have an informal conference. You don't have to have an informal conference, but I always suggest that companies have an informal conference where you can sit down with the area director, assistant area director, and discuss your case and try to settle it. If you're not satisfied with the decision in the informal conference, or you decide not to participate in an informal conference, you can contest the citations that are being levied by OSHA. State plans have something similar, but this is very, very much associated with what's going on at the federal level. So when you contest an OSHA citation, it goes to a solicitor, which is a lawyer for the Department of Labor. They look at it, and sometimes there's settlement activity that goes along between you and them before it gets heard, but it gets assigned to the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission, which is an entity that's independent from both OSHA and the Department of Labor. That's made up of 3 people, okay? That's where all of our appeals, all of our contests are heard. Now, it's been plagued with backlogs and slowdowns for years, but there's no one there to hear it now. There's
And
no
that's
one.
been a while, right, James? That's not just happened yesterday.
No, they've been with no commissioners since May, and I think they only had 2 commissioners at the beginning of the Trump administration. And it's really slowed down since 2015. It is taking forever to get cases heard. Right now, there are 31 cases awaiting review by the memberless commission, some of which date all the way back to 2017. Okay?
That's right.
So just understand that if you've got a case and it's going up to the full review commission, it takes time to go through that appeals process. Back maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, it took maybe less than 18 months. Now it's taking 2 years. And with no one on the commission, where you're not able to have a quorum, then cases are not being heard.
Right. And they kind of sit in that limbo, right, James, where there are no violations, there's no fines that are finalized because
nothing's finalized. It just shows contested. So it'll be if you go to the OSHA establishment search page, it'll show it was though they were issued, it was contested, and they just sit there. Now, during that period of time, abatement is delayed. The penalties that you're assessed are delayed. All enforcement activities are delayed until that case is heard. So for some companies, you know, because it's operating in limbo, for example, and you've got an issue with a citation that's been issued, or the severity level, or the financial penalty, or whatever reason you're contesting it, you know, this can be a dark cloud that hangs over companies for a long time. Particularly if you're a contractor looking at pre-qualification. You've not been convicted, if you will, but it shows it on the website and it's not resolved.
That's
It's
right.
not resolved.
That's
So
right.
that's something from the headlines. Again, not directly related to the shutdown, but directly related to how this process works.
Yeah.
It's
Thank
something
you.
you can
Thank you for that synopsis, James. I appreciate that. So let's get into today to our big topic for the episode, right? Which is onboarding. And I know this is kind of near and dear to both of our hearts because we see this a lot in some of the work that we do. Um, and I saw somewhere that in the first 90 days, um, the people who are getting hurt are in that first 90 days of work, right? Where they're onboarding, they're learning the job. Maybe they haven't been adequately trained yet. They don't really know what the culture is, etc. And that's kind of a sweet spot or a sour spot, if you will, for people to get hurt. And so, you know, near and dear to our hearts is how do we bring people on board? What are our tips and tricks to bring people on board? Good things to have, good things to think about, etc., so that one, you're in compliance, and two, that worker's going out there and they're prepared.
You know, I think probably the most important thing is this is a newly hired workers first introduction to your safety management system. This is their first glimpse. This should be the foundation of what everything else is built on. So, you know, a lot of times these onboarding courses, they're called like induction classes, things of that nature. A lot of people use standardized programs like OSHA 10 or OSHA 30, or in particularly the oil and gas industry, that for Bear Force, that Safe Lands Basic, Bear Force Basic 7.0, all safety fundamentals classes designed to empower the worker with what the worker needs to know on their first day on the job so that they can help identify hazards and protect themselves.
Right. Now,
Super important.
I'm gonna say that, well, again, and I've said this on previous episodes. I don't have anything against the OSHA 10 or OSHA 30, right? But they do not prepare you to do a specific job in a specific industry. For example, in the construction industry, right? Pretty much everybody has at least OSHA 10, if not OSHA 30. But all that does is give you some basic safety information, maybe how to identify a hazard, have a little bit of pause when you see something. You might say something, but it doesn't prepare you for the work that you're going to do. So let's talk a little bit about preparing for the work that you're going to do and how a company protects themselves, because there are violations you get for not doing the right thing and getting people into the field and they don't have what they need.
You know, I think it begins with a needs assessment and a holistic approach when it comes to what workers need to be aware of. There's awareness and there's competency. Your inductions class, your onboarding class or training, you know, it needs to be comprehensive enough to allow workers to begin to identify what hazards are, what their adequate controls are. It should cover things like hazard communication and how you go about doing your job hazard analysis, and definitely stop work authority. In our previous episode, we talked about documentation, right? This is where some of that documentation comes into play, is that we're teaching the workers, we're educating the workers what the rights are, what the common hazards are, how they can go out there and protect themselves. It's a good place to come in and start talking about PPE, for example. You know, uh, how much training do you need for PPE? Well, it depends on how complex the PPE is. But Doc, how long would it take you to teach somebody how to inspect their hard hat?
I mean, maybe 15 minutes,
You
10.
know, not long at all,
Not
right?
long, not long, but
Well,
I'm going to be thorough the first time I do it.
Absolutely. So that's part of the things that you see in inductions training. Gloves, other types of PPE. Probably not comprehensive enough to meet all the training requirements when it comes to the respiratory protection standards. So competency-based training somewhere else. It's over here. OSHA publication 2255 will show you and tell you exactly what that needs to be. But on the orientation side, on the onboarding courses, these are little bit snippets of what workers need to know. So if you're in trenching and excavation, you need to talk a little bit about trenching and excavation inside your uh, onboarding course. If you're doing rigging, you need to talk a little bit about what's going on with rigging operations. That doesn't make you a qualified rigger. If they're
Right.
going to go eventually into confined space, we at least want them to know what a confined space definition is before we put them out on the job, even though they may not be qualified to be an intern, attendant, or supervisor. If you got confined spaces, I need all my workers to know what they are and stay out of them.
So let's just roll back a little bit. Again, all these things are covered in an OSHA 10 course. A lot of them are covered in an OSHA 10 course. But when you're onboarding an employee, these things should be company specific. Okay? Because company
Absolutely.
specific policies and procedures are not always the same as something you get in an OSHA 10, which is meant for everybody, right? It's meant for general consumption. So one of the things that I know your company does, James, and we also offer is putting together an orientation,
Absolutely.
either a slide set or a video with some kind of a test, right? So that it's company specific. Now,
And even
that's
go ahead.
go ahead.
Even industry specific courses like Bear Force's Basic 7.0, which is a safe land course designed for the midstream and upstream oil and gas, you still need to add your company specific to that. And one of the biggest things I think it's a great misnomer about like courses like OSHA 10 and OSHA 30. And I've been an OSHA 10 and OSHA 30 instructor, general industry and construction and maritime at one time, right? Is when you get into construction, there are a lot of different electives you can have. When you see somebody's OSHA 10 card, they took it another company. You don't know what all they covered. You don't know if they talked about confined space because it's not one of the required topics. It's an elective. So make certain that whatever onboarding course you're doing contains your company specifics because it's going to come up. Remember, we talked about earlier in the last episode about communicated the rule. The rule is
Right.
effectively communicated to the employee. This
And
is a good
document, right? If it didn't
Mhm.
happen, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. So when we're talking about onboarding, right? I just want to be clear about this because we're talking about onboarding training or an onboarding presentation, etc., right? But onboarding is not just that, right? Onboarding includes medical surveillance requirements. What do they need coming in? What do we expect them to do for jobs? Are they going to be working around silica for more than 30 days a year and wearing a respirator? And they need a certain kind of medical surveillance. Are they going to be exposed to lead, chromium, things of that nature? These are all company specific, and these should be accounted for in how you're going to onboard somebody. So the other thing that I see, James, is they bring a new worker in and they want to get them out in the field right away, and their onboarding is maybe a day in the office, if that, right? Maybe 4 hours in the office. And in my mind, just an onboarding course and the basic safety procedures for a company is going to be a 4-hour process, right? And then beyond that, they may bring in training that they have. They may not have training, right? So when you talk about the needs assessment, we need to know what they need to do their job. Do they have it? Do they bring it in with them like a fall protection course or other competencies? But we also need to make sure as part of their onboarding training that those things are up to company standards, right? I can't tell you how many times I have people come in with a card and they say, I've had fall protection training or I've had powered industrial truck training. And companies will say, oh, great, we don't have to give them that, right? But what was in that training? What was in that training? How long ago was that training? And does that training have to go with the company, like a powered industrial truck training? We've talked about this before, right? That a company is who qualifies you to operate a powered industrial truck. Not your last company, not 4 companies ago, right? The company right now. So these are all in the needs assessment, and these need to be covered in the onboarding.
Absolutely. I think it begins with the training matrix. You know, we talked about this earlier. A lot of company policies, there's no OSHA standard that says, an OSHA regulation rather about cell phone usage. So let's say we have an incident when an employee was distracted because he was using his cell phone. Our defense cannot be, well, it's just common sense that you shouldn't use your cell phone when providing this activity. You need to have a rule, right? That
Right?
rule has to be communicated. Where's the best place to communicate that rule? During the onboarding
During the
process.
onboarding process.
Expectations when it comes to your workplace. Same thing when it comes to your drug and alcohol policy. Medical marijuana, recreational marijuana has created a nightmare for HR and safety professionals across this country. And maybe we do a whole episode on all that. There is no court in the land that allow you to come work incapacitated, right? But
Right.
you need to make clear what your safety sensitive jobs are, right? Because some activities you must be drug and alcohol free to perform safety sensitive tasks.
Part of your
If you're
onboarding.
It's part of your onboarding. You need to identify and tell people what these safety sensitive tasks are. Um,
Now,
also, go ahead.
I was just going to say another thing that I've seen a lot of big construction firms do, and this is one thing that the trades really get right. Right, you're an apprentice, and then you're a journeyman, and then you're a master, right? And there are certain steps that you go through that you're mentored through, and you're taught to do certain tasks at each level, right? And you have to put in a certain number of hours, and you need to go to continuing education, right, for trades. But there are non-union shops, right? And
Right.
a lot of construction firms will have as part of their onboarding process the first 90 days that they're assigned to somebody, a work team or a superintendent or a foreman that actually is their mentor. And I think this is a great idea for, anybody that's doing a trade that may not be part of a union, even if you are part of a union, to be matched with somebody who's going to help you with the company culture, the organizational culture, helping you identify hazards, showing you the right way to do things, right? So you got to make sure that when you pair people, that they're paired correctly. But I've seen this very successful, at least in the construction field.
So we have something similar. You also see it somewhat in sometimes in the construction and in some of the general industry activities. It's called a short service employee program. So a lot of our talk on here is about how to do your job safely. But there's also a component called how to do your job, right? The safest thing is not doing your job. So when you're out there, most of the job specific training is done OJT, right?
Yep.
But when we have a worker who has violated a work rule, or we have an incident where I'm having to present to OSHA why I qualified this person to work on a particular piece of equipment or to perform a certain task, particularly if it's outside of what is required in the regulation for the do it safety portion, then a lot of that OJT training, we need to have a formalized program for that. And typically that's called the short service employee program in the oil and gas industry. That's very similar to a mentorship program where we take an experienced worker and we match them with an unexperienced worker. Now, if we're going to do that, we're going to be effective, we're going to use that documentation as evidence, we need to have a defined program. All right, number one,
Testing,
what
competency
is
checks.
what is the qualifications of the mentor? Just because you've been here 10 years doesn't mean you're the best person to teach others.
Yep.
Roll Tide.
I agree
Okay.
with that. I
All
agree
right.
with that.
Then the expectations of what skills are going to be imparted to this person that we've hired, that we're mentoring, that's part of our short service employee program.
What are the
And
milestones in those skills?
absolutely, absolutely. And then documentation of when they have met those milestones, they've mastered those skills, and some type of evidence of whatever they did to demonstrate competency. Now I've got documentation as to why I'm letting this worker operate this piece of equipment.
Yeah.
See, the powered industrial truck standard is really great because it defines we need classroom training, we need demonstration, and a performance evaluation. If you take that same mentality to other activities that they do, then you can justify why you let this worker work alone on a piece of equipment or perform a certain job task, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's absolutely fantastic and should be part of your onboarding program. Workers should come out of their onboarding right into this mentorship SSE type program. And then when they've demonstrated competency, that they understand how to work safety, identify hazards, and do their job, then they graduate from that and you have documentation of it.
So most companies have as part of their, I mean, I think, or several companies have, where you have a probationary period, right? I think of onboarding as that's your probationary period. Anybody who's doing onboarding in 4 hours, for a 4 hours or a one day, right? And they're calling that onboarding. In my mind, I think it's essential to have an onboarding that lasts a certain period of time so that you have the ability to assess how they're coming along with not only organizational culture, how they're doing with the safety program, how they're doing with elements of their job. These are all part of we're not just talking about safety here. Like when I talk about learning your job, I feel that is safety, right? Learning your job is safety. And again, I will say the trades do that right. They learn certain skills, they're tested on certain skills. Like for example, here the sprinkler industry in Massachusetts, right? They have a certain level that they get to, then they have to take an exam. They learn those skills, they show they're competent, and they move on to the next thing. So onboarding is not a one and done.
You know, I
Onboarding is a process.
about 6 years ago, I assessed a company. It was a midstream company, midstream contractor, right? And the way some of the contractors work is they've got a core nucleus of employees, 35, 50, whatever it does, maintenance, routine activities. Then they get a contract and they go from 35, 50 employees to 500 in about 60 days, right? This was their orientation and their onboarding. You watched a 10-minute tape. 6 minutes was about administrative things, and 4 minutes was about safety. You don't have to be a safety professional to get this because the jury's going to get it, right? Do you think that's enough time to adequately prepare people? And if you do, how would you defend that to a compliance officer conducting an inspection or to 12 members of a jury? Because
Yep.
somebody's gotten hurt or somebody's gotten killed. So you get out of it what you put in it. Be systematic in your approach. I'm big on systems. Onboarding should be part of your system. It's your foundation. It's the first glimpse into your safety management system. Everything else is built upon that.
It's your
So
first glimpse into the company, right? I
absolutely.
mean, onboarding has everything else in it too, right? It has your administrative stuff, your other company rules, do's and don'ts, etc., right? But when you really get down to it, onboarding is a process, right? It is part of the system, but it's its own process in and of itself, and it's not a 4 hour or a one day thing. It should be something that you're really looking into to document that you feel comfortable, right? Or the company feels comfortable putting these people out into the workforce to make decisions not only on how the task is done, but also to make safe decisions and represent the company in the right manner. So that's I've said my piece.
So right now we're getting toward the end of the year. I think this is an excellent time to go back and look at some of the activities that you have going on in your organization. Look at your onboarding training. Look at its effectiveness. Look at your injury rates. Look at how you are getting people from the new hire through the hiring process to ingrained in your organization. There may be areas for improvement. If, like Dr. Martin said, you've got a track record where your personal injury statistics and your near miss statistics and all those type of indicators that you're tracking indicate that workers are getting hurt in the first 60 days, 90 days, 180 days. Track that and see. And if it's happening that way, that would indicate to me you probably got an issue with your onboarding process and improvements could be made.
Amen. So thanks again for listening to us. We love it that you come here every week. We've got a lot of valuable listeners. We'd like it if you share it with your friends. Tell them about us. We've got a ton of episodes on backlog. You can go back and look at them. You can look at them on Spotify, Amazon, uh, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you get podcasts, really. You can see them on the Risk Matrix podcast, LinkedIn. You can see them on Veriforce's YouTube. You can catch James and I on our personal pages if you want. Chime in. Let us know if we're doing good. Let us know if we're doing bad. Ask us questions. Engage with us. We're here to help, and we love this kind of stuff, and we want to get you engaged too. So like and subscribe and share us with your friends.
Absolutely. I want to make a personal challenge. If you learned something today, hit that like button. If you enjoyed our conversation today, hit that subscribe button. If you think we're bringing value to you and the safety practice in general, go ahead and reach down there, hit that share button, and share it with your friends. We're doing this for you guys. And we hope that we're adding to your safety management system, to your professional development, all with the singular goal of bringing workers home safe from hazardous jobs. So until next time,
Thanks
roll
for
tide,
listening,
baby.
and roll tide.
Roll tide.